I'm on the first episode.
There's no way I have all your essays back.
So
This should be much thicker than this.
I shouldn't watch it alone.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
They marked me absent, and then they came back, and I had to go back into the classroom.
Thank you.
They came back, and I called back to check, and they were all saying again.
Thank you.
Oh God.
These get sent to the U as evidence that I am teaching you things. The essays.
Do they read it?
There you go.
They can read mine.
Did you mark that you're here?
I don't know.
I got you guys. Oh, ready for that?
For live. Okay.
I'm gonna use the common space of the
Did you do the
middle
picture already?
stuff.
Okay, here we go. Just a reminder, paper number 1 is a thing that is due for me next week. And then that following Monday, you get the documents for paper number 2. It don't stop. The CIS train, it don't stop. It has no stops. And paper number 2, I have been told repeatedly, is the most challenging thing that kids have done in high school. That's what I've heard.
Paper 2?
Paper number 2, not essay number 2, paper number 2. In this class, you write 6 essays, 4 papers, 42 Kias, 6 times 3 is 18 objective exams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the one I've heard is at the top. Not that they hate it. It's just, it's a challenge. The readings are intense. Good idea to kind of get together with other people and see if you can really get into what the readings are, is paper number 2. Just a little bit of forewarning that is coming. All right. We've got a CI. Do you remember paper number 2? It was on slavery. Why were the slaves motivated? Do you remember that one? Would you agree with me that that was the most challenging? Maybe not. Probably the most. Okay. Maybe I'm making it scarier than it actually is. That's right. You'll feel good when you do good. Okay. Let us get back into our discussion about this document that today Americans consider to be a perfect document without flaw. The U.S. Constitution. It's right up there with the 10 Commandments and the Bible, the U.S. Constitution, but we know that that's not true. It is a human-made document, and as a result, there are human flaws, parts that are self-contradictory. For example, the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. I don't suppose any of you know the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. The 10th Amendment to the Constitution is, of course, the final, that's right, it's the final one of the Bill of Rights, right? There were 10 amendments made immediately, and the 10th Amendment says this: everything not designated as a responsibility of the federal government shall be the responsibility of states or the people. I'll repeat that. Everything that is not designated by this document as being the responsibility of the federal government shall be the responsibility of the states or the people. What that means is, if it doesn't say the federal government can do it in this document, that means states of the United States can do it. Okay, you understand? In other words, it's a limit on the federal government. The federal government can only do what this document says it can do. Say, who would appreciate that interpretation? What historical figure would say, right on? Jefferson! Jefferson! The strict interpretationist. The one who said the federal government can only do a limited number of things. A small number of things. That is a conservative point of view. Jefferson liked it. But there's another part of the Constitution called the Elastic Clause. It's in the same document. And it's called the elastic clause. What does elastic mean?
Stretchy.
Stretchy, right? It's stretchy. The elastic clause, which is in the Constitution, says that the government can expand the meaning of this document to cover things that might happen in the future. There is no way that the writers of our Constitution could ever envision nuclear missiles. No way. And yet, clearly, that's a thing. And so how would the Constitution, which is about 250 years old, address these future things? Well, the writers of our Constitution foresaw that. And so they said, look, we need to stretch the meaning of this Constitution to cover things that we cannot foresee. And now do you see a problem? You've got the first thing saying, the federal government can only do these things and nothing else. And then you've got the second thing saying, well, yeah, but we can stretch the meaning of the Constitution to cover things so that the federal government can't address them. Those two things seem to be diametrically opposed to each other. You have the Constitution arguing with itself. And I will expand on this. Here are some ideas. The 10th Amendment restricts the power of the federal government because it says you can only do what this document says you can do. All other powers go to the states. For example, there is nothing in the Constitution that says that the federal government has the right to charter banks. Which means, according to the 10th Amendment, what is the only government entity that can charter banks? States. Only states can. And yet Hamilton comes along and comes up with the idea of the national bank. That's the federal government founding a bank to put tax money. And Jefferson says, you can't do that. The 10th Amendment says you can't do that. And of course, Hamilton had a response. Yeah, I can. Because of this thing called the elastic clause. The elastic clause doesn't restrict federal government power, it grants federal government power by allowing the government to expand its influence to cover things that might not be foreseen. So Hamilton would say, not only can we open a national bank, it is our duty to open a national bank. I said duty. Because Congress has more power than is explicitly stated, says the elastic clause. And yet the 10th Amendment says, no, you can only do what this document says you can do. Everything else is done by the states. Drop the mic, walk away. Drop the mic, walk away. Walk away. You understand. Team Hamilton would look with favor to the elastic clause to justify its actions. Team Jefferson would look to the 10th Amendment to justify its actions. As you're writing and thinking about this, I want to inform you that your second essay is an argument going on between those people that wanted to limit the power of the federal government and those that wanted to expand the power of the federal government. And part of the requirement is specific examples. Here are two. Here are two. There they are. And the history of our nation is a history of groups of people being elected to power and then saying, all right, now that we are in charge, let's expand the power of the federal government because the elastic clause gives us that right. And other groups, more conservative groups, when put into positions of power, saying, let us stop expanding the power of the federal government. The 10th Amendment says that the federal government doesn't get to do all these things. As an example, I give you regulations. Regulations, right? So Obama came along as president and said that it is the duty of the federal government to protect a new class of people. The that's it. The gay, lesbian, transgender, that group of people deserves protection from the federal government. If a business is not serving them, it's happening in Minnesota. A wedding video company is being sued by the state of Minnesota because they refuse to go and videotape weddings of gay people because it's against their religious beliefs. And they're arguing, we have the right to do this. The First Amendment says we have the right to religious expression. Our religion forbids us from acknowledging two people of the same gender getting married. So we don't feel like we should be forced to provide our services in a religious ceremony that goes against our religious views. And the Obama administration disagreed with them and sued them, saying you can't do that. You don't get to work at Target and then when a Jewish family comes saying, I don't believe in Jew, so I'm not going to sell you your products at Target. Sorry, you work at Target. You don't get to make that decision. You don't want to serve Jewish people? Quit! Move somewhere else. Go back to Nazi Germany. Travel through time. You'll have a great time there. But in America, you don't get to have that option of refusing service based on your religious views. And the Obama administration created a new group of people to protect. They justified it on the Elastic Clause. We can do this because the Elastic Clause gives us the ability to stretch the meaning of the Constitution to protect another group of people. And within the past week, has basically said, we're not doing that anymore. We'll protect race, we'll protect religion, but you don't just get to invent a new group to protect. Sorry, members of that community, but we're no longer going to do that. So we'll see what happens. We'll see, because it is probable that the Supreme Court will weigh in and say one or the other. Either the United States, along with protecting people based on race and religion and other things, gender, must also protect this group of people. They are one of the protected. You cannot treat them unfairly. Did you know in the United States there are certain groups of people that can be treated differently? Like in this building, this public building. Did you know there's legal segregation? There's legal segregation. There are rooms I'm not even allowed to go in. The bathroom. I can't even go in the girls' bathroom, which is a good thing. But do you understand that that's legal segregation? Segregation based on gender is legal in certain situations. But we don't have a black bathroom and a white bathroom. That's not legal. Okay, but should we have a male bathroom and a female bathroom and then a third bathroom with, a guy that's half guy, half girl, like a dress on one leg and pants on the other leg? And then if you don't feel comfortable in one of the gender-based bathrooms, there's option number 3. Should a public building be This is up to you to decide on your own, but this is a question that the Elastic Clause would say, yes, let's expand the meaning of the Constitution to cover that new group of people. Now, let's be careful here. It's not that the 10th Amendment says, no, these people shouldn't be protected. What the 10th Amendment says is, let's let states decide. Let's let states decide whether or not this group of people deserves legal protection. So we can go back and forth with all sorts of issues. Should the federal government have the authority to tell car companies to have better gas mileage in cars? Yes, says Elastic Clause. You can do that. No, says 10th Amendment. That's up to states. So, for example, did you know California is requiring, that by some year, it's like 2030, all houses shall be solar-based. Wow, that is an extremely aggressive state. But it's the state doing it, not the federal government doing it. Any questions? Okay, you can see how Hamilton and Jefferson are going to have fun here. Hey, I can build a national bank. No, you can't. Your mom. Et cetera, et cetera. Okay. That is the conservative view. That is the liberal view. Even today, that is somewhat true. The liberal believes in the elastic clause. This is the part of the Constitution that we're going to go with. So we can. The conservative point of view is the 10th Amendment. No, you can't. You can't. States can, but the feds can't. Let's keep going. Okay. Did you know I made this? I didn't. I found it. I like it. We are looking at something called the Whiskey Rebellion. Why do people hate whiskey? It's taxed. That's right. It's not that they hated the whiskey. They hated that it was taxed. Now let's go back to the American Revolution. Do you remember what the 5 products the British taxed were? Tea? No. Paint. Glass, paint, paper, lead, and tea. The 5 most popular products imported by the colonies. Today, that would be cell phones, oil, whatever. Okay. The British purposely taxed those 5 things. The Americans responded by saying, we're not represented, so we don't have to buy these things, so we're not going to. We're going to boycott it. And tarring and feathering British tax collectors, et cetera, et cetera. You British are tyrannical. You are acting as a tyrant. Fast forward to the federal government, the new federal government, taxing whiskey. And some Americans are going to respond the same way. Taxing us on products, you're punishing us, we don't like it, and we are going to rebel. So this is Alexander Hamilton, and we know that according to the cartoon, he's evil. How do I know he's evil? He's got that smile, that smirk on his face, and Batman rules. He's slightly tilted. In Batman cartoons, the villain was always slightly tilted. So evil Alexander Hamilton. The new Constitution gives the federal government the right to tax. Let's tax. Do you understand why are we going to tax? No, he doesn't say that. Because we can. Let's tax to show them we can. They removed the tax on 4 things, but kept the one on tea, just to remind the colonists that we can tax you. We're going to tax you 1 product. Same thing here. Let's tax whiskey just to show everyone we can tax. Okay? What he does is gets a tax on whiskey, which is a product made from corn. So if you make whiskey from your own corn, you owe the federal government money. Right?
Yeah.
Now, slide number 3 represents people out west. Now, back then, west is Western Pennsylvania. That's way out there. It's how you and I look at like Idaho, right? No one lives in Idaho. Potatoes grow in Idaho. It's very barren. That's how people back at this time viewed Western Pennsylvania. And you can see that we've got 3 people. And what they're saying is those Easterners are stealing our money. These people grow corn. And what do they do with the corn? Well, they use it to feed their animals, but they also make whiskey. And they suddenly owe the federal government tax money because they make whiskey out of corn. You're stealing our money. It's the same thing that the Americans said about the British. You Easterners are stealing our money. The British were Easterners. Okay, so let's reveal some things. Number 1, Hamilton believed in the elastic clause, giving him the authority to tax. The tax was put on whiskey. It's an excise tax, which means a tax on a specific product. People out west resented Easterners taxing them, just like Americans being angry at the British. If you're on your phone right now, I don't know why you are. So they're going to resist. Look what happened to that tax collector. Do you recognize this guy and this guy? That guy's this guy. This guy is that guy. This guy is that guy. And look how they're dressed like patriots, like a real American during the American Revolution. We got Daniel Boone there in a little coonskin hat. We got a patriot here, and that poor fella is a tax collector, and he's just been tarred and feathered. It should remind you of the way the colonists treated the British, because to these people, the federal government is the British. You're the same. You're just like them. Okay, so we have a rebellion. And according to this slide, it is the first attempt to threaten. Now, again, this says national. That's a mistake on my part. It should say federal. It is the first threat to the federal government. Do you remember the previous rebellion that we looked at in here? Not the American Rebellion against the British, but the other one. Bacon's Rebellion. Very good. Bacon's Rebellion. And that was based on, partly on taxes, but partly on the failure of the colonial government to deal with Indians. Well, we've got this Whiskey Rebellion. They're tarring and feathering tax collectors. Now, here we have either evil Alexander Hamilton. And who's that fella who doesn't look very happy? That's Georgie. That's G-Dub, my man. President G-Dub. And look, Alexander Hamilton's got the National Piggy Bank. And look at all the gold in it. Is there any gold in it? It's empty. The National Piggy Bank is empty. The National Bank has no money in it. And he's talking to Georgie saying, Mr. President, the rebels threaten the entire nation. We must be able to raise money. The Constitution says so. The Constitution says we have the right to tax. These people that are rebelling are threatening the Constitution. And if you're threatening the Constitution, you're in rebellion. And these two know a little bit about rebellion. They're the ones who started that other one. The American Revolution. You're looking at the two of the principal members of the American Revolution. So they know rebellion works. They know it works. Theirs worked. And the U.S. is very young at this time. They just overthrew the British. They're incredibly young. And here comes another rebellion from out west. Are the Americans going to fail to crush that rebellion like a grape, like the British failed to crush the American Revolution like a grape? So the question is, who has sovereignty? If the federal government, big question here, if the federal government imposes a law, can you say, no, Rosa? Let me go back. Are these people Rosa-ing? Are they Rosa-ing? Isn't that a right of every American? If you think there's a law that's unjust, can you refuse to get out of your seat and go to the back of the bus? Can you do that? Isn't that what these people are doing? Aren't they exercising their American right to disobey what they see as an unjust law? Well, not to Hamilton. They're in rebellion. That's what's going on. They're just in rebellion. Who has sovereignty? Can states and individuals ignore national laws? Hamilton would say, no, no. Now, I will once again remind you that your essay has as part of it the Sedition Act. And part of it is, can states like Virginia and Kentucky ignore a federal law like the Sedition Act? And Hamilton's argument is no. And what you need to do as part of that essay is provide specific examples. Here's one. The Whiskey Rebellion is an example of an attempt to ignore a federal law, the federal law on the tax on whiskey. Can you do that? Can you ignore a federal law? Can you, Rosa? And Hamilton's response is no. What ends up happening, by the way, is George Washington resumes his role as commander-in-chief, raises an army, marches out to Western Pennsylvania, and everyone gives up immediately. They're not going to fight George Washington, so they surrender. Something like 12 of them were put on trial and found guilty, and they were about to be executed, and George Washington pardoned them. I pardon thee. It's over, right? We're not the British. We're not going to execute you as if you're war criminals. You gave it a shot. You lost. Let's move on. You're Americans. I'm an American. Let's move on. Okay, which is kind of interesting. And then he retired. So G-Dub puts down the rebellion. G-Dub believes the question has been answered. What question? This one. Can states and individuals ignore federal laws? He believes the question has been answered. No, you cannot. You cannot, Rosa. You can't. That would create a nation of chaos. My God, states could even secede. And then if states secede, we might have a civil war or something. That'll never happen. Because you can't. See, the question's been answered. Can states ignore federal laws? No, they can't. And that was the end. Right? No, of course not. Of course you know that all those things that I just said happened. They happened. States continue to believe they have the right to ignore federal laws, even though George Washington thought, but you can't. You can't ignore federal laws. But that wasn't the end. Now, number 8 is sort of interesting, and it again should sound familiar. Will you come up here? I can't believe I have to deal with this. This is weird. This is new for me. Come on, little boy. Boy lacking maturity. Everyone's looking. Everyone. Okay. The federal government, after the Whiskey Rebellion, passed this thing called the Force Act. The Force Act did something that today we'd think, well, yeah, duh. The Force Act gave the Army the prerogative, permission to enforce laws. The president could now use the Army to enforce laws. And you might be sitting there like, well, what else are they used for? What else is an army used for?
War.
War. Fighting the enemy. And now George Washington can use the army to enforce the whiskey tax or any other federal law. You see, you cannot, Rosa. And to strengthen the federal government's enforcement of federal laws, he can now use the army to enforce federal law. And this will play a role later on when Andrew Jackson is president. Yes, dear. I'll say this, not officially, but he sure did have their views. But he never actually registered as a Federalist Party member. But yeah, right. Anyone else? Let's keep going. The emergence of certain political parties at this time. On the left is the view of a certain political party. And this should look familiar, and that's why we're not going to spend too much time on this slide. The belief that states' rights need to go away so that the federal government could be successful. That the federal government can assume state debts, that the federal government can impose a tax, that the federal government can create a national bank. All of the federal government could suppress rebellions. All of these are the point of view of a certain political party. Does anyone know? The Federalists. That's right. The Federalists. Makes sense, right? Give the authority to the federal government. The Federalists. The Liberal Party. Up here is the identification of two political parties that existed. In the middle is the issue and how each party felt about it. So, hey, should the federal government assume state debts? Yup, said Federalists, we can do that. Elastic clause. Nope, says Democratic Republicans. You can't do that. 10th Amendment. Hey, can we tax whiskey? Yep, we need to. Pay off the debt. The elastic clause. No, you can't do that. 10th Amendment. Hey, can we create a national bank? Yep. Nope. Hey, the French are beheading their king. The French are doing what we did, getting rid of their monarchy and trying to set up a new government where the people are in charge, and they're asking for our help. This is true. The French overthrew their king and then immediately said, hey, Americans, will you help us? Because when the French overthrew their king, Britain immediately invaded to put the king back. Not that king. He was dead already. But to put the French monarchy back. And you might think that's weird. Why would the British do that? Why would the British do that? The French overthrew their king, and immediately the British invaded to put the French monarchy back into power. The same French monarchy that had just fought the British in the American Revolution, the British are coming to their rescue. Why? Yes. That's right. Because if the French people overthrow their monarchy, what are the British people going to do if it works in France? It's not going to work in America. It's not going to last. And they kept saying that year after year, decade after decade, like it's over any minute now. And it's proven to not be over, right? And then the French said, well, it is working there. Let us try it here. Overthrew their king. The British immediately invade. And the French come to the U.S. Hey, U.S., can you help us? Can you help us? Yes, says the Democratic Republicans. We should support the idea that the people have power. No, say the Federalists. They're idiots. People are idiots. You're sheep. And if you're trying to understand how this fits with these things, just put it this way. Who knows best? The federal government knows best. The federal government knows best. To the Democratic Republicans, who knows best? We know best. We know best. Stop telling us what to do, elite. But we know better than you, and we know it. It's like the guy in dodgeball. Here at Globo Gym. This is Globo Gym. This is Joe. Do we know dodgeball?
Yeah.
Read that movie. Globo Gym. Joe's gym. Joe's average. What does he call it? Average Joe. Average Joe gym. There you go. Okay. As an example, you're looking at a lovely drawing. This is the French method of execution. That's a guillotine. And that's Louis the 14th. And there's his head right there. That's the body, and there's the head. The French Revolution got really, really bloody. Something that didn't really happen in the U.S., and it got really bloody over there. And as people were losing their heads, something like 60 to 70,000 people got beheaded. And with every beheading, Alexander Hamilton and the Federalists are like, see? They're idiots. They're chopping people's heads off. It's the mob. We don't want to get involved there. Good God, let's stay out. Last bit of note here. Britain and Austria invaded France to put the French monarchy back. And it says here, this meant fighting in the Americas over colonies because there were some, not many, but a few French colonies in the Caribbean. So it's potentially war coming back. And it says the French Revolution was much more violent than the American Revolution. Oh, I'm sorry about that. So picture George Washington. There he is. Should we get involved? And on his left shoulder is Alexander Hamilton. Stay out of it! Stay out of it! Mob! Sheep! And Jefferson, get into it! Democracy! They helped us! Which they did, right? American Revolution, French helped us. And now, come on, says France. And if you think about it, it's like, well, the French monarchy helped us. You just beheaded them. So are we helping you? Yeah, we are French. Why do you think we have this outrageous accent? Any questions here? So what do? Last slide. What do? Neutral. We don't help the British, but we don't help the French either. Neutral. What the French asked us to do was to defend these islands, which are in the Caribbean. French possessions. Hey, America, will you simply defend them if the British try and take them over? Defend the French Caribbean from any British attempt to take them over. And the U.S. said, no. But we helped you. And the U.S. said, realpolitik. Has anyone in here ever heard that term before? Realpolitik. Okay, let's think of a silly example. Stev here runs out of gas, and I drive by, and I happen to have a 5-gallon thing of gas in my trunk. I help her out. Pour the 5 gallons into her trunk. She now has 5 gallons. She goes home. Next day, I'm out of gas. She drives by, and she slows down, and she sees that I'm out of gas, but if she helps me, she'll be late for that thing. Where are you going? It's really important. School, fine, school. And there's test, first hour. So she opens the window and says, I'd love to help you, but I can't. But I can't. She might as well have just said realpolitik. Anyone want to take a shot? What does it mean? In both cases, when I helped her and when she refused to help me, whose interests did Stevie serve? Her own. Always her own. Realpolitik is a view of how you should behave as a nation that goes something like this. Does it help us? Yes, the French helped us, and that helped us. But if we help the French, the British will be angry at us, which doesn't help us. We always act in our own self-interest. Always. So I'll give you another example. President FDR. Did you know that President FDR knew the Holocaust was happening? He knew it. He did. He was shown reports about what the Jewish people were going through. And he basically said, no. No, as in, we're not going to intervene. The U.S. at that point was not in World War II. That's realpolitik. The noble thing to do would have been immediately to declare war on Germany and to stop the Holocaust. It was an awful thing. But he had a point of view that said, but we're not involved. We're not in the war yet. Now, once they were in, they were all in. But at the moment, he had a realpolitik point of view. Is this good for us? So did you know right now there's a genocide going on in the middle of Africa? Did you know that? Why aren't we stopping it? What's in it for us? I'm not saying this is the right point of view. I'm saying it is a point of view. What's in it for us? There's another point of view that says America should always do the right thing. If there's genocide going on in the middle of Africa, we should stop it. Send in the Marines. Send in the Marines. Send in the Marines. Wherever there's injustice, send the Marines. Realpolitik would say, we can't. We can't save everything. It's what's in it for us. And that's what Washington. Wow. We did a lot today. Question? We have 15 minutes. That's right. My goal is one more document and then a couple other things that we're going to take care of. Okay, so you know what? You don't even have to move. Document 2 people. You're up. You can just talk out loud. Sure. So get out your the documents. This would be document 2. Okay? So I'll just ask a series of questions, and then if you read this document, you can answer them, and then the rest of us can kind of join in here. Remember, you're not quoting from this. Did everyone hear me? You're not quoting from this. Not quoting. Should you quote from this? No, don't. Okay. Who's our speaker? Jefferson is our speaker. Who was Jefferson in the context of this document? Yeah, who was he? It's 1794. He's Thomas Jefferson. And Washington was first elected in what year? Do we know? 1789. Reelected 1792. This is 1794. Jefferson at this time is the Secretary of State. That's who he is. Secretary of State. The issue that Jefferson is addressing is taxes, the national bank, debt. What does he have to say about these issues? Those of you who read it. What does he say? He doesn't like taxes. Why not? Very good. It punishes poor people. How can you afford the tax on whiskey? You don't have the money. Very good. It's an economic argument. Now, Madison and I happened to have a conversation before. So, Madison, what kind of tax is the whiskey tax? Oh, no, you forgot it. It's an excise tax, which means a tax on one product. Hey, Madison, let's say you and I go down to Holiday and we both buy a Snickers. You with me? Let's just say the Snickers costs $1. And let's say that there's a 100% tax on it, so it actually costs $2. Okay, $2. I buy a Snickers, $2. She buys a Snickers, $2. Who paid more? Madison? Madison paid more. Now, if you went to Mr. Schultz and explained it, Mr. Schultz would have a headache because Mr. Schultz would say, well, no, you paid the same. Didn't we pay the same, Madison?
Well, yeah, but you make more money than I do, so I pay more out of my income.
Very good. Do you understand?
No. I'm Mr. Schultz.
Do you really not understand?
Madison has
You don't really don't understand. Who paid a greater percentage of their income to buy that Snickers bar?
What?
Let's just pretend that I make $50,000 a year and she makes $10,000. We both pay $2. Who paid a greater percentage of their income? Are you following me?
I have $5 and he has $10. Me paying $2. Now I only have $3 and he has $8 left.
Wait, where did he tell us that Madison was
He didn't. I'm just trying to make it easier for you to understand.
You did. You made it harder.
I mean, realistically, do we all assume that I make more money than she does?
Yeah.
What do you do for a living?
Nothing.
You do nothing. Okay. I'm a teacher here, all right? So my income is larger than her income, which means a sales tax punishes people who make less money. You understand? It's different from an income tax. An income tax says the more you make, the more you pay. But a sales tax, a tax on a product, actually says the less you make, the more you pay in terms of percentage of your income. And the whiskey tax was a sales tax. Jefferson said this tax is bad because it punishes people who make less money. Wouldn't it be crazy if there were a sales tax where when you bought the Snickers, the person selling you the Snickers said, okay, now we have to figure out how much you owe. How much do you make? And then I said, oh, my income's $50,000 and pressed a few buttons. Okay, it costs you $3. And then when Madison walks in, how much do you make? Nothing. Costs you $2. Wouldn't that be crazy? If the things you bought, the cost of it were based on your income. And if you think that's insane, that's what they do in Europe. They have taxes based on that. At the end of the year, you report major things you purchased in Europe, and then you owe the government that much money based on your income and what you purchased. Kind of crazy. Okay. So one of the arguments was he didn't like it because it was a regressive tax. It punished poor people more than wealthy people, the whiskey tax. What does he have to say about the National Bank? No. Why? What's wrong with the National Bank? It's not in the Constitution. The existence of the bank is unconstitutional. State banks, fine. Each state can charter their own bank. The federal government can't. Where does it say it can? It can't. 10th Amendment. Right? Anything that I missed? He doesn't like the whiskey tax because it was a regressive tax. He doesn't like the National Bank because it's unconstitutional. Does he address anything else?
Yeah.
What? The debt.
Yeah.
Well, shouldn't we pay the debt? He did. Does he address the debt?
He said he did before.
Yeah, never.
Finish that. It's a great thought.
Is it wrong? If it's wrong, I'm not
No, it's not wrong.
gonna. That the power should like be in the states.
There it is. The power to pay off debts accrued by a state should be paid for by the state. You're all going to be in college in a couple of years, and you're going to accrue, most of you, debt. You know who's supposed to pay that debt? You! You pay the debt. You pay your debt. I'm going to buy a house, and I'm going to get the bill for the house. I'm going to go to my neighbor and say, hey, can you pay this? And my neighbor's going to be, no, you bought it. You bought the house. You pay the debt. States like New York that amassed a huge amount of state debt should pay for it. That's what he had to say about assumption. It's dumb. Assumption of state debts is dumb. It rewards the irresponsibly spending northern states. It punishes the fiscally responsible southern states. Very good. Anyone else? Anything else? I have your University of Minnesota ID number.
Yay.
I will tell you.
You already got his.
You follow the instructions on this piece of paper. You can finally go to University of Minnesota volleyball games for free. You have to be one of the first 400 people to show up, though, by the way. You finally have discounts if you want to go for football. And I understand if you say, why would you want to do that? I get it. But go for basketball should be okay this year. Go for baseball is always good. Free.
Student tickets to the game.
Student tickets to the game, yep.
And I get free ones.
To be completed by teacher.
That's what I've been waiting for. Basically, like the CIS.
I don't think I'll get your numbers to you, all of you today, but what's going to happen is I'm going to be standing up here. You will walk up to me with this piece of paper and where it says U of M student ID number, and there's a line. That's what you're going to get from me, that number. What you do with that number is explained on this piece of paper, and you, all being the best and the brightest, can read. You're going to create your own U of M account, and that account gives you privileges, access to the U of M online library, access to the library itself. You can go check out books if you want. You can go to student sections of athletic events if you want. You're a U of M freshman. Okay, so just let's not have more than 5 people in line here, but here I'll be. Come on up, find your name, and write down the number that is to the left of your name. Find your name and that number.
I'm down. I'm down.
It's 7 digits.
Yeah.
I don't think